Hi everyone, a warm welcome to today's event where we will be discussing all things cloud marketplaces and how cloud marketplaces feature in business IT procurement strategies from a practical standpoint. Hope we are able to make it a little bit thought provoking as well. Thank you to everyone joining in and for taking out time from your busy schedules. I am Amit Lad, your host for the event. I'm a practice director with the firm in the sourcing and vendor management team. I work closely with our Global 2000 buy-side enterprise clients. We support them in enhancing and streamlining their tech and tech services procurement strategies with our market intelligence. So before we dive into the topic itself, we would love for everyone to share in the chat where they are joining in from. Uh, I myself am joining in from Bangalore, India, uh, and the weather here has been uncharacteristically hot. But we have other panelists who are joining from Seattle and Charlotte. So amongst us, we have covered a lot of geographies and also time zones. Uh, so yeah, please do let us know in the chat where you are joining in from. Uh, so yeah, the topic that we have for today's conversation is one that has been getting a lot of attention in the tech and sourcing world right now. And the topic is cloud marketplaces and how they can be leveraged as a channel for IT procurement, whether it be your security, software and infrastructure, or even the managed and professional services that you want to procure. So for the uninitiated folks in here, cloud marketplaces are nothing but platforms that enable buyers to discover, evaluate, test, and also purchase various products and services like SaaS solutions, managed services, professional services associated with them, among other things. And cloud marketplaces also help IT procurement stakeholders to facilitate better use of the committed cloud spending that they have. Also, streamline vendor onboarding, accelerate the acquisition and deployment processes, so on and so forth. So, there are a couple of things that cloud marketplaces help in terms of streamlining your procurement processes. Now, having said that, we just wanted to get a quick pulse of where the audience is at in terms of their cloud marketplace awareness. So we have a quick poll launching for everyone. Yes, you can see it on your chats right now. So what do we want to know is uh, we want to know what is your familiarity with cloud marketplaces, uh, whether you use it very frequently or you have heard about them, but you maybe use it occasionally. So yeah, we will just give you a couple of seconds so that you can answer that question. Uh, while you do that, maybe we can do a quick round of introductions from our end. As I mentioned, the topic is cloud marketplaces, and we'll be talking about it from a few different angles. Uh, what we want to do is we want to understand how is it driving enterprise adoption, how marketplaces are changing the buying journey, and so on and so forth. So to that end, we are thrilled and honored to have Siddharth Nabar from AWS joining us for the conversation today. Uh, Sid is a product leader with AWS who is focused on marketplace transactions. Thank you so much for joining this conversation, Sid. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the audience today?
Sure. First of all, I'm really happy to be here and thanks for having me. This is a topic that's close to my heart and my team's heart. So excited to be here. I'm Sid. I lead the product team for AWS Marketplace transactions. So my team oversees the entire transaction motion from the seller side, creating the pricing and presenting the pricing to the buyer, and the actual transaction that creates the subscriptions, as well as all of the procurement and governance features that we offer in AWS Marketplace, such as what we call private marketplace, where you can curate the catalog for your own employees, You can manage purchase orders. You can manage any purchase policies that you have. You can integrate it with your procurement tools and systems, and so on. I'm based in Seattle. I've been with Amazon for more than 9 years now.
Got it. Thank you for joining in, Sid. We are also joined by Matt Corsi, who is the Vice President with the SVM team here at Everest Group. Matt, I would invite you to please introduce yourself and also kick off the discussion for us today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Amit, for the introduction. So in terms of my background, I've been doing sourcing, procurement, vendor management for about 20 years now. Have a combination of practitioner experience at heavily regulated, risk-averse organizations like Bank of America, MetLife, most recently Truist Financial, as well as research and consulting experience. I was with Gartner for 6 years, covered the software asset management, how organizations should be buying software, really rethinking things through. And then most recently joined Everest Group about 7 months now. So I am working with buy-side practitioners to help them navigate the lens of how to use marketplaces within their organization, understand their risk appetite. There's also been a lot of new governance features introduced into these marketplaces that we'll talk about today, so that organizations can think through what's the right balance between enabling business agility, driving outcomes for the organization, creating self-service, but also putting the right governance and controls and making sure we get the right terms, the right pricing, but also thinking through kind of the how to govern and manage this within your organization. So we'll talk through some various options today.
Yeah. For the audience, we are getting some answers to our quick poll. So just a quick note, what you would have to do is comment your answer in the chat. If, for example, you are using cloud marketplaces frequently, then you would want to just type 1 in the chat so we get to know that. While the audience is doing that, I would just like to add some perspective here. So, for a long time, IT procurement was largely driven by traditional models like direct enterprise sales, reseller relationships, etc. And what these traditional models entail is those long contracting cycles and also sometimes fairly fragmented buying processes, if I have to say so. But what we're seeing now is that it is beginning to change. And at its core, this session is about helping you reduce the ambiguity around cloud marketplaces. Many organizations are aware of them, but a few of them maybe use it for market discovery or supplier research, but they still fall back on the traditional procurement routes when it comes to actual buying. So this discussion is planned to help you, the audience, understand what are the various procurement pain points that marketplaces can address, what cloud marketplaces really are, and why they matter. So we'll be touching on the value proposition of cloud marketplaces and what the key considerations are for organizations when you want to evaluate cloud marketplaces. So the major takeaway for you after this would be that you would be able to build a business case if you don't already use cloud marketplaces. That is where we want to reach. With that, I want to bring Sid in. So Sid, I am curious to know, when you speak with your buy-side clients, what are the major pain points or challenges that these IT procurement stakeholders highlight? What are you hearing a lot in terms of software and services sourcing?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into that. I think I would say the top 3 things we hear as recurring patterns are as follows. I think the first one is this balance between governance, control, and speed. Every business unit, every engineering team wants speed. And when they discover that new AI model or that new software that they need or a new project management tool that meets their needs, they want to buy it and start using it ASAP. While the procurement teams need to make sure that the purchase is governed, being bought under the right terms, bought at the right price, the licensing is efficient for the entire company, things like that. Right. So there is this tension between the two. But as I'll talk about later, often I think it's a false trade-off. There doesn't really have to be a trade-off between governance and speed, but the traditional process forces that trade-off. So that's one. The second is, with the advent of AI and agentic tools, the landscape of the number of solutions, the number of vendors, and even in a given vendor, the number of products that you could purchase is exploding. Every other week, you'll see new models come out, new LLMs or new agentic tools come out. And so, for a small centralized procurement team, it's almost impossible to keep pace with this exploding landscape and then have one-to-one relationships with those many vendors, start the contracting cycle. By the time you're through that cycle, there's a new product that's more attractive already. So I think that's the other one, that it's exploding. And the third and last one, which has been sort of a problem for a while, is insufficient visibility, especially as the organization grows, or we have some customers who have grown through mergers and acquisitions. There isn't enough visibility about, hey, what softwares or what products do I even have today? How are those licenses being utilized? Which ones should I prioritize for renewals? So just having that visibility and having that consistent visibility across the different stakeholders like procurement, engineering, finance, leadership is a big challenge for most customers.
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful to know, Sid. Also, what we have been hearing from our clients, to add to the challenges that you have mentioned so far, is the technology debt that is leading to vendor consolidation. Like, many of our clients are stuck in those unfavorable long-term contracts, and often have to deal with those growing maintenance and operating costs for their existing software portfolio. So instead of just directing those funds to innovation or the digital transformation programs that they have, these organizations are now forced to sort of allocate those resources to just maintaining that current, often underperforming technology asset. Do you also see that being one of the challenges when you speak to your buy-side clients?
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, the landscape is changing so fast that a software that met your needs 3 years ago is unlikely to sort of keep pace with the latest tooling. It may not interoperate with some of the other tools that you have now adopted. So you need that agility, you need that flexibility to go across products or go across even vendors to continue keeping pace with the emerging landscape.
Yeah. Matt, I would also like to invite you to add the perspective from a ex-practitioner standpoint as to what were the challenges that you were facing when you were handling these software and services spend portfolios.
Yeah, I think it's really about, I think most procurement organizations want to try to govern and control everything, right? And sometimes they lose sight over what's the broader business focus of the organization, right? So what is the ultimate impact we're trying to drive? We're trying to drive, in a lot of cases, revenue generation for the business, right? A lot of these applications and technology are enabling, us to operate and stay competitive in the marketplace, speed the market, right? So I always put my revenue generation cap on with my savings cap and my risk mitigation cap. Depending on different organizations I've been at, they've had different risk appetites. A lot of times, I would argue there's parameters, and what I've liked really about some of the recent changes in the marketplace, they've introduced more configurability to put governance and controls in place. So if I'm a procurement leader, I want to enable the use of a marketplace within my organization. I can now set some guardrails and parameters around how I want to deploy that, aligned with what is, works within my, organization, and what I'm comfortable with. So some things that I also like to challenge, procurement leaders on is, let's just take some examples of some small dollar spend software purchases, right? Now, a procurement organization is going to think through, okay, well, it's going to start as a small dollar purchase. It might grow into a big purchase, right? We do see cases where, the business starts experimenting with a product, and then it becomes a large purchase, and we want to try to get the right pricing and the right terms in place. But also, in a lot of cases with small purchases, we don't always have the leverage to negotiate like we think we do, right? We know there's risk, right? But are we really going to be able to get legal resources from a software provider on a phone call to negotiate a EULA for $100,000 purchase? Chances are no. They're going to say take it or leave it, right? So we also have to think through kind of what our risk appetite is and what's practical. Where should we be getting more hands-on with some of these procurement purchases and taking a more traditional approach of doing RFPs and trying to negotiate complex custom agreements? And then where should we be using vehicles like marketplaces? And especially as we start to introduce more technology, automation, and governance capabilities in these marketplaces, I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to move further upstream in terms of being able to do more complex, higher risk purchases and have the risk and controls that we're looking for from a traditional procurement risk governance perspective, within these marketplaces. But it's also just thinking through kind of how to quantify that internally, right? And really take a step back and help the organization understand from a risk appetite lens, what is it that we're taking on? What's the right risk versus reward in terms of enabling those outcomes and revenue? And then also a lot of procurement teams right now are challenged with bandwidth, right? So by us taking the eyes off the ball of certain types of software purchases that could be facilitated through a marketplace, what risk are we actually leaving on the table or cost by not spending time on something else, right? That we should be prioritizing with the limited bandwidth we have. So I think once you take a more macro lens to this, you start to really understand and realize how these marketplaces should really be part of your strategy and enabling some self-service with the right guardrails and governance, to help you really enhance your value proposition to the business.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful, Matt. And also to add to your risk appetite part, we often hear from our clients, right, that they have these complex vendor ecosystems, which makes it very difficult to keep a track of what are the risks that are arising from this portfolio. So, Sid, the question that I have for you is, do you see that clients are approaching you with this problem statement in terms of how do you simplify this complex vendors ecosystem that I have and provide me with that visibility to the nth level in terms of not just streamlining my procurement workflow, but also ensuring that it is compliant and risk-free at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at every stage of the purchase and with the different stakeholders involved, the challenges are different. So at the discovery and evaluation stage, cloud marketplaces sort of provide a lot of information upfront. For example, the SOC 2 certifications or the ISO certifications, any other security information that the vendor has provided, you can see that upfront in a catalog. And you can also compare multiple products, apples to apples, in a more standardized way. So that helps you ensure that the vendor assessment is done in a faster and compliant way. And it also helps bring in your stakeholders, like maybe you have a vendor risk assessment team or a security risk assessment team. So it helps you engage them as well. On the other hand, if you want to enable self-service, cloud marketplaces also come with governance controls, like Matt was mentioning, where you could put in place sort of mandatory policies that, for example, anyone purchasing from marketplace must enter a purchase order before purchasing a product, which then ensures that they have prior approval and budget to buy that. You can also control which products out of the entire 30,000 plus listing catalog, which products are approved or pre-approved for your employees, and they only see that subset. If they want to add a new product to your subset, you can configure it such that they request an approval, but they cannot directly purchase that product. Instead, they request an approval that then comes to you. You can then unblock that for them based on your assessment. So I think with all of these tools, as Matt mentioned, like cloud marketplaces have come a long way from traditionally, or I guess in the early 2010s and 2012s, we started off being more for buying one-off machine images or buying one-off software bolts and nuts from marketplace. But now we have come a long way to providing sufficient governance controls and sufficient control mechanisms for procurement teams for even your largest purchases, like your security platforms, your analytics platforms, your CRM systems, your ERP systems, and so on.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Sid. So you were talking about the evolution of how cloud marketplaces have grown, right? Uh, but then there is also that component of maturity in terms of organizations and their usage of cloud marketplaces. So often what comes up in our conversations is that we have those clients who are thinking about marketplaces as something where you can draw down your AWS cloud spend commitments, uh, and that is that. So they use it sporadically to do it, and then they just switch to their traditional procurement channels. So to have someone at that maturity level, and then to see enterprises who are best in class in terms of using cloud marketplaces, how do you see that journey mapping out, and what would your advice be in terms of moving from that first level to the best in class level?
Yeah, it's definitely a common starting point to start when it's, we call it an opportunistic mode, where you have some committed cloud spend left on the table. A marketplace purchase helps you get that. But I think operating in that mode, you're leaving a lot of value on the table. First of all, even in the committed cloud spend itself, if you were to consciously model your marketplace or your third party spend upfront, you would qualify for a higher discount and a higher commit already, rather than only doing the opportunistic part at the very end. That's purely on the committed spend point. But even apart from that, there is so much value to be had by standardizing your purchasing across marketplace. And our most advanced customers are seeing that value and then sort of doubling down on marketplace because of that value. For example, if you have, as you mentioned, many of our clients have sort of complex vendor ecosystems. Each vendor has their own invoicing systems, own renewal processes, own contracting processes, and so on. Whereas a cloud marketplace helps you standardize all of them, especially in something like billing and invoicing. Imagine having to onboard just one invoicing supplier, and all of your invoices are now coming from that system, and you have clear line items for all of your software purchases. That makes it much easier downstream for your other stakeholders like FinOps or your finance teams and so on. Similar with contracting or discovery and evaluation, where it's really a standard view and a consistent view across different vendors and different products versus having to do sort of one-off and inconsistent processes. And then at the last mile, after the software purchase is done, when it's time for a renewal or it's sort of time to decide how to consolidate multiple licenses, you also have consolidated usage monitoring and cost monitoring tools where you can see how all of your software purchases are being utilized, how your spend is doing, which of the licenses were and were not utilized. So that helps you inform how you should negotiate the renewal going in. And again, these tools are available to all of your stakeholders. So your engineering teams or business units, your finance stakeholders, legal, and you can all have the same view from the same tools, and they're standard across all your vendors. So there's not 10 different dashboards to see or 10 different terminologies in terms of utilization and cost. So I think that's really sort of the value that the mature customers are enjoying once they reach that point. To your question of how you get there, it's actually not a bad starting point to start with a certain sector of your spend. Like a lot of our customers will often start with their tail spend, because that's sort of where you don't get sufficient ROI by handling each of those tail spend softwares one by one. And so they'll often start with them. They'll try marketplace motions. They'll see how the invoicing works. They'll see how their chargeback systems or purchase order systems integrate with marketplace, sort of get your feet wet, get the processes integrated into your processes, and then keep growing from there. Or you can do a single business unit or a single company that you have recently acquired, start with their portfolio, which is typically more contained than your entire software portfolio, and just start there and then grow as you get more comfortable.
Got it. So I think the key takeaway for me from this was that there has to be that intention uh, when you think about cloud marketplace strategies, right? So Matt, when you think of the cloud marketplace strategies that you had in your previous organizations, uh, how do you see it? Was there a formal structure to it, or uh, were you guys doing it sporadically? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, I would say from kind of the risk adverse organizations I've been at, right? Starting with Tailspin would be the most practical use case, right? So thinking through, where are we comfortable with small dollar purchases to start, right? Where we know we're not going to have the negotiation leverage to get on the phone and really we're going to have to set the ULAs as they are, right? So why not enable it through the marketplace. The marketplace also has other benefits, right, in terms of tracking, what we're buying, the license utilization once it's deployed on AWS. So there's other benefits to track and manage things through the marketplace beyond just kind of a vehicle for delivery. And then, also thinking through kind of where, what is the right governance and controls, right, in terms of where do we need to get higher touch? You can do more negotiations now through the marketplace, I think, than some sourcing practitioners maybe know about, right? So I think raising awareness in terms of understanding, where should we start pushing use cases further than we did in the past, where some of these new features that have been added recently by AWS, and then also there's other approaches that organizations could also take in terms of negotiating, broad contract terms of their own, right? So if an organization really wants to be hands-on with having their own licensing terms with particular vendors, right, you can still go and negotiate, EULAs and standard licensing terms to kind of govern the contractual T's and C's, and then facilitate the purchases through the marketplace, right, underneath those contracts. Some other things that Sid mentioned, right, with putting the POs in place and putting the right controls. So there's ways you can configure and deploy these marketplaces with specific use cases that align with your the way your organization wants to buy, and as well as how you want to structure things. Some other things also to consider, right? Financials, right? So if we have multiple different organizations using licenses, you can do chargebacks and things of that nature that are now, possible within the current architecture that AWS has put in place. So, just thinking through, where is this going to be able to free me up for certain types of purchases? I have the confidence and controls around the governance, and things are being done the way I want them done as a procurement professional from a risk and cost perspective, to now enable me to be more strategic in my role and go focus on things that I couldn't do because of the volume of work across my desk. Typically, it's hard getting additional procurement resources, right? We're all busy, have a lot to do on our plates, right? So these, the marketplace is really a tool for us to automate and drive efficiencies, within the organization.
Yeah. This reminds me of one interesting conversation that I had with one of our clients, and they were talking about the benefits that they have realized out of using cloud marketplaces. And one thing which they pointed out was that they really like the flexible pricing models. They mentioned that because these cloud marketplaces offer flexible pricing and payment options, whether it be like annual subscriptions or pay as you go pricing, or also some options like bring your own license. That is why they kind of don't find themselves to be restricted in terms of using cloud marketplaces. So Sid, can you speak a bit too about what flexible pricing models are all about and the kind of benefits or how they can provide a solution to the challenges that IT procurement stakeholders face?
Yeah. So I think it's best to view it from the lens of your level of maturity or level of comfort with that particular software, right? So a lot of our customers, when a business unit first wants to try a software and see if that meets their needs, like to start with like a free trial, right? Or a freemium version, which we support. So you could have a free trial of the software that then converts to a paid tier, maybe in a month or 3 months or so on. Now, when you have graduated from the free tier and you see some value there, you still are not ready to sort of commit a certain spend or pay upfront for the licenses. So then we have pay as you go models. We have some based on usage, and then for professional services, we have time and materials based pricing as well, where you can set sort of milestones and then you pay as the milestones are achieved. Or in terms of software, it's very standard pay as you go. You pay based on either API calls or storage usage and so on. And then typically after clients have sort of tried a software and now they're sort of confident that they're going to enter a long-term relationship or increase the volume of purchase, we have multiple sort of commitment options. Right? We call them contract. So you have contract with upfront pricing, or you have contract with flexible pricing schedule, where you can have a monthly invoicing or a quarterly invoicing or even an annual invoicing for up to 5-year deals. And so with these pricing models, you sort of they grow with you and with your needs from that particular software. Now, when you go to more sort of traditional software models like machine images, there are additional pricing models like annual or hourly or bring your own license, where based on how much you use them, AWS metering for the EC2 already kicks in, and then you are charged based on that.
Got it. Yeah, that's helpful said. So I know we talked about some advantages that cloud marketplaces offer, but said the question that I wanted to ask you was, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that organizations have in terms of cloud marketplace usage? Are they still mainly seeing them as buying portals, or have they now started viewing them as strategic procurement channels?
Yeah, I think when I think about the biggest misconceptions, I think the first one is this sort of false dichotomy between having control and governance versus enabling speed. And before Marketplace, I used to lead product for an AWS security and governance service. And it's interesting the parallels between the two, because security and cloud teams have learned the same lesson many years ago, where it's really about the central team providing a paved path for the business units. So cloud teams and security teams did that through something like infrastructure as code. And you want to make the right way the easiest way. Once you do that, all of the business units naturally fall in line and you start seeing like shadow IT reduce, because the recommended way is also the fastest and most efficient way. And so, similar to infrastructure as code for security and cloud, cloud marketplaces play that same role for procurement, right? So, the myth is that, oh, if I open up marketplace, it's going to be chaos and everyone is going to buy what they want at whatever price or terms they sign up for, which is absolutely not true. We have now cloud marketplaces in general have matured with the number of enterprise grade and governance features that we support. You can negotiate private terms, you can negotiate private pricing, private ULAs, you can curate which products in the catalog are approved or not approved for your employees to purchase. You can mandate a purchase order, you can mandate a purchase size, and so on. So I think that's the first myth is, oh, if I open up marketplace, I'm going to lose all control. The reality is actually the contrary, that if you don't enable cloud marketplaces, your traditional procurement process or workflow is likely slower than what your business units need, and then you're going to have to contend with shadow IT. So you're going to lose more control by not doing marketplace. I think that's one. And then the second one is, I think, the diversity of the catalog. Folks still feel like, oh, marketplace may have just, a few SaaS tools, or may have mainly machine images or container images, but the catalogs have matured significantly since those days. We now have tens of thousands of listings across more than 30 categories. There are security solutions, data analytics solutions, professional services, managed services. And then recently we launched an AI agents and tools category where you can even purchase MCP servers or AI agentic solutions. So really the diversity of products that you could purchase through marketplace has increased sufficiently since probably folks looked at it last.
Okay. Yeah. So, Sid, one other perception that we have seen amongst our buy-side clients is that uh, they feel that the cloud marketplace and the cloud associated with it will restrict their strategy. If they are pursuing a multi-cloud strategy or they want to stay cloud agnostic when it comes to their sourcing strategies, then this might be a kind of obstacle. So, is that also a question that you often get from your clients?
We do, and late in May last year, so May 2025, we sort of expanded our catalog policy where any software solution can now be listed on AWS Marketplace, even if it's not deployed in AWS. So on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud SaaS vendors are welcome to list on AWS Marketplace, and we are seeing such vendors list in marketplaces. Honestly, some of our customers also purchase from multiple cloud marketplaces, like not just AWS, but other hyperscalers as well. And that's okay too. So you don't sort of relinquish control of your multi-cloud strategy if you have one by purchasing from AWS Marketplace. You can still sort of purchase all of the same softwares, and you can also leverage multiple different cloud marketplaces. Although you will then sort of start seeing slightly diminished value in terms of the standardization and consolidation that I was talking about, right? Like now you have multiple invoices, multiple cost management and usage management tools to contend with. It's still better than going one by vendor. So
Definitely. And also the flexibility in pricing models, which you mentioned already. I really like the point which you talked about in terms of not having to overcome it upfront, because, well, if you overcome it upfront, then you have that misalignment between your procurement and business stakeholders with what the actual usage is and what the demand patterns are, and then it is just a mess, right? Also, I believe having that, not having to overcome it upfront, it will also improve budget discipline. Uh, Maybe it could also be about that spend visibility that it brings and making the spend measurable, which will sort of bring that intentional, disciplined approach to budgeting. Matt, on the point which Sid was talking about in terms of multi-cloud strategies and also the various misconceptions that organizations have in terms of cloud marketplaces, would you like to add something in terms of what you saw in your experience in the past?
Yeah, I would just say some of, like I said, previously, some of the, things Sid talked about in terms of the additional governance and controls and, the way you can customize policies and the way these marketplaces are deployed gives organizations now a lot more controls in place in terms of being able to deploy these and really determine how do we want to use these within our organization. I would agree with Sid as well, right? I mean, just unless you have a super large procurement team and unlimited resources, which I don't know any organization that does. If you don't enable the right balance in terms of speed, cost, and risk, the organization's either going to go around you, or you're going to lead to shadow IT, or you're just going to be delaying the business from generating revenue and being quick to market, right? And then your competitors are going to come in and start to move faster than you, right? And then you have other challenges that the organization's facing. So you need to find this right balance. And I think it somewhat depends on the organization in terms of how they want to use this, what their culture is. But I think it's really important for them to stay abreast with these new features and functionality that AWS has added. And if they're not using these marketplaces today, to really look into how they should be using them, right? How do we streamline our software purchasing and deploy these marketplaces in an efficient manner that works for us from a cost, risk, and speed perspective. So a lot of the early on, concerns I think that sourcing practitioners had, AWS has done a lot to, add these new features and functionality to try to address those. So, I would just encourage organizations to look at those, really think through how they should deploy these, so that we can find that right balance, between, making sure we don't have too much on our plate where we're becoming a complete roadblock, delaying things from getting done, to where there's a perception, issue, in terms of being too slow, but also at the same time doing what makes sense for the business as well as, cost and risk.
Yeah, definitely. And on the point of not being a roadblock, one thing or any conversation is not complete without talking about AI, generative AI, and agentic AI, right? And what we often hear is procurement teams are still skeptical, or maybe there are those certain industries of organizations like banking, financial services, who might be skeptical in terms of usage of AI in general. And I'm not even just restricting it to cloud marketplaces. So Sid, can you throw some light on what challenges do you hear your buy-side clients bring up when you talk about AI or agentic AI being used in cloud marketplaces at various junctures throughout the value chain?
Yeah, I think, as you said, there is just there's a lot of fear of the unknown, and
Yeah.
especially in terms of the contracting terms, customers are rightly concerned about whether the software vendor will use my data to train their models. Is my data vulnerable to leakage, and things like that? So for that, we encourage them to work with the vendor to sort of have the right terms in the contract and things like that. I think the second one is sort of just assessing the landscape of what tools are out there, which ones are trustworthy versus not, which ones are feature rich enough, and even the pricing models we see evolving. So for example, the traditional pricing models of maybe per seat licensing or usage based costs are not scaling well for the agentic mode. So we see some vendors going towards outcome based pricing, and then how does that look from a customer perspective? So the pricing models are evolving. The needs of the business units continue to evolve, and folks want to try different LLMs, different agents, and see what makes sense for them. So I think that's creating the need for even higher agility on the procurement team, right? How do you unblock experimentation? How do you unblock sort of free trials or premium versions to try out different agents before settling on a purchase? And then the last one I would say is the use of agents in procurement itself. So what we are seeing, not just in AWS Marketplace, but even broader research indicates that the use of AI for procurement itself, and this is across all the stages, has gone up from 46% to 92% in a single year. So now 92% of our buyers are using AI somewhere in the procurement cycle, whether it's discovery or evaluation, whether it's in analyzing a lengthy contract and assessing which of the terms are a deal breaker versus not, whether it's getting more information about the product or competitive products and so on, or whether it's about the actual purchase action as well. And in most cases, what we see is The AI is not sort of a shortcut or a replacement for the human expertise. It's actually adding superpowers to the person in the procurement seat, because now it enables you to pull information from 50 or 100 different sources and do deep research on a given product or its competitors in a much shorter time frame than you could otherwise. And the AI enabled buyers are typically diving deeper into a product's specs, into its API spec, into its interoperability, and so on, than traditional buyers. So, again, this is where cloud marketplaces shine, because imagine if you are wanting to use an AI agent to go across, let's say, 5 products and compare them. It's not going to want to email 5 different sales reps and wait for slide decks to be sent across. You want a standardized catalog where all of the information is consistent across the products, all of the information is available upfront. So you can do that, your agent on your behalf can do that analysis and create sort of a comparison or a proposal for you. And I'd encourage folks to try out what we launched last year called Agent Mode, where you could go to AWS Marketplace today, and in agent mode, you can literally upload a requirements document that you got from a business unit or a use case that you are trying to solve, what kind of product you're looking for. The agent recommends some candidates, and then you can customize how those candidates are compared, whether you want to compare based on security, based on pricing, based on previous customer reviews, and so on. And then once you pick a winning candidate, you can also create a custom proposal where the agent will ask you, what sector are you in, what business use case are you trying to solve, and so on. And then it generates a PDF proposal that you can then take to your stakeholder. So with all of this, you can see how it reduces the amount of effort or time that the procurement person needs to spend on the procurement cycle, but it's not really sort of sidestepping them or
Yeah.
replacing them anyway.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear, Sid. And of course, AI being the augmenter rather than being someone who can replace you is what we see happening across the market. Now, the the element which you mentioned about agents providing suggestions and doing it in a conversational manner, the question which we often get when we're talking with enterprise stakeholders, not just about cloud marketplaces but about AI in procurement in general, is that what do you do about the hallucinations? What do you do about the error or the accuracy rate of the responses that these tools provide? Because at the end of the day, the foundation is generative AI, right? And generative AI is prone to hallucinations. So can you share a bit about what you guys are doing in terms of solving for this problem?
Yeah, I'll first say that I'm not the expert at at agentic
Yeah.
and eval frameworks and reducing hallucinations, but a lot of our most senior engineers are focused on these problems. It's a misnomer to think that all of the agents functionality is based on generative AI and is based on LLMs. That's actually not true. So often only a single thin layer on top is the LLM translation layer, but a lot of the other orchestration that it does is calling deterministic tools, calling deterministic APIs, and then just sort of transforming that information back using an LLM. So there is the state of the art has continued sort of moving at a very rapid pace in terms of the different evaluation frameworks available. We had LLM as a judge, now we have LLM as a panel where you can have multiple other agents based on different LLMs evaluate the work of your primary LLM. So now the chances of hallucinations or sort of knowledge gaps go down even further. We ourselves spend a lot of time testing through multiple different use cases and even frameworks, different prompts, different prompting techniques to ensure that what we launch is at a very high accuracy bar and sort of quality bar. To give you sort of a sense, 99% of the top 1000 AWS customers now buy from AWS Marketplace. And if you think of the top 1000 AWS customers, these are not small companies, or these are not companies that would sort of tolerate a low quality bar or non-deterministic results. So I think cloud marketplaces have matured to a point where they are sort of the go-to tool for a lot of large enterprises and regulated sector customers. So I think there's a very high focus on quality bar and reliability.
Got it.
Yeah,
Thanks for
I wanted to jump in and add one point. So one of the things I really liked from a buyer's perspective that AWS has added is just, what Sid mentioned about being able to get, a lot of times buyers are dependent on the business and the technology teams kind of telling them, hey, this is what I need, right? They may not always be the experts in the technology, right? So being able to use the AWS, the AI functionality, as well as, looking at comparative options in terms of, okay, I have these business requirements. What other software options are out there, right? How can I drive competition into this versus kind of the businesses coming to me and telling me, hey, I need this software, right? So, I really like the functionality, being able to drive education as to what other vendors could really solve for those business requirements, and then be able to introduce competitive tension in a systematic and efficient manner where, in a traditional sense, right, if something comes across my desk, I may not have the time to go do the research and go get competitive bids. And now I can create a self-service vehicle where the business could actually, do this themselves, right, for certain purchases that they want to drive through the marketplace. So, thinking through about how to deploy it in that fashion, I think, will, really appeal to buyers and give them a sense of control, as well as increasing competitive tension and getting better pricing.
That's actually a great point, Matt, because that sort of helps you transform the role that procurement plays vis-a-vis the business units to not just be sort of an executioner or an orchestrator of a given software purchase, but actually adding value into the cycle of saying, hey, have you considered this other vendor or this other product that meets all of your needs but has a better pricing model or aligns better with our terms and things like that. So it actually sort of helps improve that collaborative relationship versus
yeah, and it also just drives hopefully better pricing, right? So being able to do competitive bids, private offers through the marketplace, doing research on comparative options, it does open up possibilities that likely wouldn't have even been considered for certain types of purchases, right? It takes a long time to go do research, do RFPs, collect competitive bids, and with all these competing priorities across, these sourcing leaders' desks, right? A lot of times they're just sole sourcing things, right? Or trying to do direct negotiations. So being able to facilitate that and use this technology to drive, enhance that competitive bid process through the marketplaces, especially in a self-service manner where the business could potentially go out there and facilitate these actions themselves in a governed approach, does increase, what procurement leaders are looking for.
Yeah. Those are very insightful points, Matt. Thank you for that. So just one other question from my end. So we talked about various aspects of using cloud marketplaces for software, but with AI, we are also seeing the convergence between software and services, right? So can you talk a bit about how cloud marketplace can be used for professional services and managed services procurement? And also the additional question that I have on this is, are there certain types of professional services that are more suitable for marketplace listings, if that is the case?
Yeah, so marketplace has had professional services for a while now, but recently we have a couple of features that we added that are truly accelerating the sort of adoption and revenue growth with those. The first one is what I mentioned earlier, the time and materials based billing option. So traditionally, services are often paid based on the milestones and work in your SOW and sort of as you reach that stage. So we now support that as a pricing model in marketplace. The second one is what we call multi-product solutions, where essentially you might think of these as bundles, where an SI or a GSI could bring together multiple related software products as well as add on their own services on top to really solve an end-to-end business outcome for the buyer. And this is very attractive to buyers because in a single sales motion, in a single negotiation, and with a single point of contact on the selling side, they acquire all of the softwares in the right quantities and interoperating with each other, as well as the necessary services to solve a certain business problem. For example, we have like zero trust security solutions that are end to end turnkey. We have Gen AI transformation solutions that are available. So I think that's the other model where professional services or managed services are bundled together with software in a single sales motion for better efficiency.
Got it. Yeah. So for the audience, we also have a complimentary offer. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a QR code. Please scan that, and you will get access to our report on cloud marketplaces. So there were a couple of things that we discussed in the conversation today, which are a part of that research document. And you will also get deeper insights in how cloud marketplaces are being used by best-in-class organizations as levers to unlock cost efficiency and agility in their procurement workflows. Now, I know we have only a few minutes left on the clock. Sid, my one last question to you would be, what would be the mistakes that you would say organizations should avoid when they are building out their cloud marketplace strategies?
Yeah, we touched on some of these before, but I think the biggest one is sort of this all or nothing mentality of either I'm going to transact my entire software portfolio through marketplace or I'm going to shut it down completely. Like that's not a mentality you want to have, and that's not helpful. Instead, I would encourage folks to think about where is the best place to get started. Start somewhere and then sort of grow your familiarity, grow your comfort level, see the value accrue, and then grow from there. I think that's one. And then the second one is sort of going at it alone. So we have seen examples where the engineering team often discovers marketplace and starts using it without procurement in at the table, or vice versa. The procurement person gets exposed to marketplace features, they want to try to use it, but the engineering team isn't aware of this. So really, I would encourage folks to have sort of bring their stakeholders together and evaluate cloud marketplaces as a joint solution versus going at it alone.
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful, Sid. Matt, any final thoughts from your end?
Yeah, I would say to what Sid mentioned, right? I would argue, depending on the organization and how progressive they want to be in terms of using marketplaces and, versus kind of a traditional sourcing path, starting with the tail spend, in my opinion, I find it hard to understand where the argument would be to not consider starting there, right? I mean, you don't have enough spend to negotiate those deals. They're taking up time and taking your focus off the larger strategic deals that have a much larger risk impact and cost impact to the organization. So starting there, and I think it would actually reduce risk for the organization, help you increase savings, because now you're running them through the marketplace, you're getting more competitive offers, you're creating self-service, you're getting the business moving, generating more revenue, driving more outcomes, increasing your credibility with your stakeholders, and then allowing you to move further upstream and be more strategic in terms of driving your category and your spend. So, and just, getting started, right? Understanding the features and functionalities that are out there, and we're just getting started. sure we'll continue to see these marketplaces evolve and increase the functionality and ways we can deploy them, put the right guardrails in place to have the comfort we need to drive the value we're looking for.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Looks like we are at time. We sincerely thanks Sid for joining us for the conversation today. Thank you for your time, and it has been a pleasure to have you for our LinkedIn Live. We learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure that the audience also has multiple takeaways for their teams when they think about the cloud marketplace strategies.
Thank you for having me. This was fun, and happy to have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt.